Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about how to write linear equations with a different format. So last week we talked mainly about standard form and talked about slope-intercept form. Today we're going to focus on a new format that is called point-slope form. So sometimes you are given a point and a slope, and then you have to be able to write the equation based from there. So the format for point slope form is going to be y minus y1, where y1 represents the coordinate for the point, the y coordinate for the point, and that's going to be equal to m times the quantity of x minus x1, where x1 represents the x coordinate to your point. So we'll write that stuff down too. This is where m is going to represent the slope. So we already know that m is our format for identifying the term slope. And where the point x1 and then y1 is going to represent your point. Okay, now you need to be very careful, be mindful of when you have negative coordinates, because sometimes you guys forget to put minus a negative. Sometimes you look at it and go, it's already a negative and there's already a minus sign, so it's just the minus sign. But you have to be, cautious or mindful if there happens to be negative values for your point, for your x coordinate or your y coordinate. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right on in and start with our very first example. If we have the point 2, 6, and we've got the slope of 3 over 2. So we've got the point 2, 6, and we've got that slope that's 3 over 2. So first thing I want to do is I want to identify the values that I'll be represented. So my slope, my m, is 3 over 2. My x1 happens to be right here. The 2 is my x1. And then my y1 happens to be that 6. Okay, so now that I know these values, I can plug it in into the equation y minus y1 is equal to m times the quantity of x minus x1. So really the only things that are going to stay exactly the same in here is that y minus an equal sign and then an x minus inside of this parenthesis set. Okay, so we had y minus y1, so that y1 value happens to be that 6. My m value happens to be 3 over 2. And my x value happens to be a 2. Okay, so there is the point slope form for the equation. Now, what you have to do is you're going to go ahead and convert this. You're going to convert it into our slope-intercept form. You have to know how to put all formats of equations into that slope-intercept form because that's how we graph. That's the main format for how we graph our linear equations. So I'm going to take that first line or that equation, the y minus 6 is equal to 3/2 times x minus 2. And the first thing that I want to go ahead and do is distribute. Because I have this multiplication on the outside, I need to go ahead and distribute it to each component on the inside. So 3/2 times x is going to give me 3/2 x. 3/2 times a -2 is going to give me a -3. So I now have 3/2 x minus 3. On the other side, I still have that y minus 6. From there, you'll then go ahead and get the y by itself by adding 6 to both sides. Now, adding a value, you can only add like terms. That's different than what we did previously last week, where we had to divide everything. That's because multiplication and division have to happen equally on both sides to every single component. Addition and subtraction only can happen when it's like terms. So we're adding 6 to both sides to get those like terms. So we're now going to have y equals 3/2 x, and then a -3 plus 6 is going to give us a +3. So there is our equation. Y is equal to 3/2 x plus 3. All right, let's go ahead and look at another example. Okay, so let's say that we have the point is at -2, 3, and that our slope is equal to 4. So we have -2, 3, and our slope is equal to 4. So the first thing I'm going to do is put it in that slope-intercept form. So we have y minus y1 is equal to m times the quantity of x minus the x1. Okay, here's my m value. Here's my x1 value, and here's my y1 value. So we now get y minus a 3 is equal to 4 times the quantity of x minus a -2. Remember that x1 is a -2, so we have minus a -2. Be very mindful of that. Now, when you've got minus a -2, that's the same thing as just saying x plus 2. Minus a negative can convert to just a single positive. You have to be aware of that. Okay, from here, we're going to go ahead and distribute because we want to get it into that slope-intercept form. So we're going to distribute the 4 to the x and to the 2. So this now becomes 4x plus 8. So we have y minus 3 is equal to 4x plus 8. We'll then go ahead and add the 3 to both sides. And that will give us our final answer of y is equal to 4x plus 11. Okay, let's try one more. And at any time, you guys can go ahead and pause the video and try the problem on your own and then see if you get the same answer. You are welcome to always pause, try on your own, and then see if you can get the same answer that I do. Okay, go ahead and put it into my format. So y minus my y1, here's my y1 value, y minus 2, is equal to my slope. Here's my m value, so that's -1/2, times the quantity of x minus my x1 value. Here's my x1 value, that -1. Keep in mind, minus a negative is the same thing as just saying we're going to add a positive. So that minus a negative, that minus negative just turns into an addition. Okay, from here we're going to go ahead and distribute. A negative half times x gives us a negative half x. And a negative half times a 1 is just going to give us a negative half. So we now have negative half x minus a negative half. We still have that y minus 2 on the other side. In order to get that y by itself, we would add 2 to both sides. And then we get our final answer. Y is equal to negative half x plus 3 halves, or 1.5, or 0.5. Or, sorry, 1.5. Okay? Now, one more problem. We're going to try one more problem. This one's set up a little bit differently. So I'm going to go ahead and flip to the next page. With this problem, I'm going to give you 2 points. So 8,1 and negative 2,9. 8,1 and negative 2,9. So the very first thing that you would need to do, you've got a point. You can use either one of the points. It really doesn't matter. In fact, I'll show you it with both points so that way you can see it can come out still to the same. But for here, the first thing you want to do is solve for the slope. Now, in case you don't remember, your slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And it does not matter which point you're choosing to be which. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let this be my first point, and this is my second point. So I'm going to subtract the y's, 9 minus 1. So 9 minus 1. And then the x's, negative 2 minus 8. Negative 2 minus 8. So 9 minus the 1 is going to give me 8. Negative 2 minus 8 is going to give me a negative 10. And when you simplify it, it comes out to a negative 4/5. So there's your slope. Now, again, it does not matter which point you choose. So let's say that I choose the point 8,1. Then my formula would be y minus 1, because there's my y1, is equal to my slope, negative 4/5, times x minus my x1 value, so minus the 8. Okay, the first thing that I would need to go ahead and do is distribute here. Distribute negative 4/5 to the x, which is negative 4/5 x. And then distribute negative 4/5 to that negative 8. So negative 4/5 times a negative 8 is going to give you a positive 32/5. So then you have y minus 1 is equal to negative 4/5 x plus 32/5. You would then go ahead and add a 1 to both sides, and you'd get y is equal to negative 4/5 x plus 37/5. Okay, now I'll show you it still comes out the same if I use 9 and negative 2. Oh, sorry, negative 2 and 9. Okay, we'll do y minus the y1 value, so y minus 9 is equal to negative 4/5 x, oops, sorry, times x minus a negative 2, because there's your x1. You would first go ahead and distribute that negative 4/5 to the x and to the minus a negative 2, which happens to just now become a positive. Let's go ahead and rewrite that part first. So y minus 9 is equal to negative 4/5 times x plus 2, and then we'll go ahead and do our distribution, just so you don't get too confused. So that becomes negative 4/5 x minus a negative 8, sorry, not a negative 8, minus an 8 over 5. Minus 8 over 5. So now you have y minus 9 is equal to negative 4/5 x minus 8 over 5. You would then add 9 to both sides. Okay, adding a 9, that's essentially the same thing as saying, oh, I'm technically adding a 45 over 5. Okay, 45 over 5 is the same thing as 9, but you want to have a common denominator, right? So then our final answer here is y is equal to negative 4/5 x plus 37 over 5. So they come out to the exact same equation. It really does not matter. Okay, so after this, you've got an IXL that you're going to work on. Make sure that you complete the IXL to a 70 or higher.